There's a health epidemic sweeping through our aging population that doesn't get nearly enough attention, and it's killing people as surely as smoking or obesity. It's not a virus or bacteria. It's not diabetes or heart disease, though it contributes to both. We're talking about loneliness. And if you think that's just an emotional problem or a minor quality of life issue, you need to hear what the research is revealing. Loneliness literally changes your biology in ways that accelerate aging, suppress your immune system, increase inflammation, raise your blood pressure, and dramatically increase your risk of early death. Welcome to Elderly Discoveries, where today we're uncovering the disturbing science behind why lonely elders die sooner, and more importantly, what can be done to reverse this deadly epidemic. Let's start with some numbers that should shock you. A comprehensive meta-analysis published in Perspectives on Psychological Science analyzed data from over 300,000 people across 148 studies and found that loneliness and social isolation increase your risk of premature death by 26 to 32%. To put that in perspective, that's comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It exceeds the mortality risk from obesity. It's one of the most significant health risk factors we know about, yet most doctors never ask about it, and most health systems do nothing to address it. Another study from ARP found that over 42 million adults over age 45 in the United States suffer from chronic loneliness. That's not occasional loneliness, which everyone experiences. That's persistent, ongoing loneliness that becomes a constant companion. Among people over 75, the numbers are even worse, with some estimates suggesting that up to half of all seniors experience debilitating loneliness on a regular basis. This isn't just sad. This is a public health crisis, with body counts that rival major diseases. So what exactly is happening inside the body of a lonely person that leads to earlier death? The mechanisms are multiple and interconnected, creating a cascade of biological changes that undermine health. The first and perhaps most significant is chronic inflammation. When researchers measure inflammatory markers in the blood of lonely versus socially connected people, they find dramatically higher levels in the lonely individuals. We're talking about markers like C-reactive protein, interleukin-6, and fibrinogen, all of which are associated with heart disease, stroke, cancer, and Alzheimer's disease. The reason this happens relates to how our bodies interpret loneliness. From an evolutionary perspective, being isolated from your tribe was extremely dangerous. You were vulnerable to predators, unable to hunt large game, couldn't defend yourself effectively, and had no one to care for you if injured or ill. Your immune system evolved to respond to this threat by ramping up inflammation in preparation for the wounds and infections that were likely when you were alone. This made perfect sense in our ancestral environment. The problem is that in the modern world, loneliness triggers this same inflammatory response, but instead of protecting you, it damages your blood vessels, promotes cancer growth, and accelerates aging. The inflammation isn't temporary either. It becomes chronic, constantly elevated, creating oxidative stress and cellular damage throughout your body. Your arteries become stiff and damaged, atherosclerotic plaques develop and grow, your blood pressure rises, and your risk of heart attack and stroke increases substantially. Studies have shown that lonely people have significantly higher rates of cardiovascular disease, even after controlling for other risk factors like smoking, obesity, and physical inactivity. The impact on your immune system goes beyond just inflammation. Loneliness actually changes gene expression in your white blood cells, the immune cells that protect you from infections and cancer. Research led by Dr. Steve Cole at UCLA found that lonely individuals show increased expression of genes involved in inflammation and decreased expression of genes involved in antiviral responses and antibody production. This means lonely people are simultaneously experiencing more inflammation and less protection against infections. They're more likely to catch colds, flu, and other infections, and they take longer to recover when they do get sick. This immune dysfunction also affects cancer surveillance. Your immune system is constantly patrolling your body, looking for abnormal cells, and destroying them before they can become tumors. When loneliness impairs the surveillance function, cancer cells are more likely to escape detection and develop into clinical disease. Multiple studies have found higher cancer rates among socially isolated individuals, and the mechanisms are becoming increasingly clear. The cardiovascular effects of loneliness are particularly well documented. A study published in Heart followed over 480,000 people and found that social isolation and loneliness were associated with a 29% increased risk of heart attack and a 32% increased risk of stroke. The mechanisms involve not just inflammation, but also stress hormone dysregulation. Lonely people have chronically elevated cortisol levels, the stress hormone that in short bursts helps you respond to challenges, but when constantly elevated damages nearly every system in your body. Cortisol raises blood pressure, increases blood sugar, promotes abdominal fat accumulation, suppresses immune function, and impairs sleep. Speaking of sleep, loneliness severely disrupts sleep quality. Research shows that lonely people have more fragmented sleep, with more frequent awakenings throughout the night, even when they spend adequate time in bed. This poor sleep quality compounds all the other health problems, as sleep is when your body repairs damage, consolidates memories, and regulates hormones. The cognitive effects of loneliness are particularly devastating for older adults. Multiple longitudinal studies have found that loneliness significantly increases the risk of cognitive decline and dementia. The Rotterdam study followed over 2,000 people for 3 years and found that lonely individuals had a 64% increased risk of developing dementia compared to those who weren't lonely. Think about that for a moment. Being lonely nearly doubles your dementia risk. The mechanisms appear to involve several pathways. Chronic stress and elevated cortisol damage the hippocampus, the brain region critical for memory. Reduced social interaction means less cognitive stimulation, as conversations, shared activities, and social problem solving all provide mental exercise that keeps your brain sharp. Lonely people also engage in fewer physical and social activities, further reducing the cognitive stimulation that protects against decline. The inflammation we discussed earlier also damages brain tissue and blood vessels, reducing blood flow and promoting the development of both Alzheimer's pathology and vascular dementia. There's also a behavioral component that creates a vicious cycle. Lonely people are more likely to engage in unhealthy behaviors. They're less motivated to cook nutritious meals for themselves, often eating poorly or skipping meals entirely. They're less likely to exercise, partly because many forms of exercise are social and partly because depression and lack of motivation that often accompany loneliness make it harder to engage in self-care. They're more likely to smoke, drink excessively, and use other substances as coping mechanisms. They're less likely to follow medical advice, take medications as prescribed, or attend medical appointments. All of these behavioral factors compound the direct biological effects of loneliness, creating a downward spiral where loneliness leads to poor health, which leads to further isolation as health problems make it harder to get out and socialize, which leads to worsening loneliness and even poorer health. Breaking this cycle becomes increasingly difficult the longer it continues. It's crucial to distinguish between loneliness and social isolation because they're related but different phenomena with different health impacts. Social isolation is an objective measure of how many social contacts and interactions you have. Loneliness is a subjective feeling of being alone or disconnected regardless of how many people are around you. You can be socially isolated, but not lonely if you're naturally introverted and content with limited social contact. Conversely, you can be surrounded by people yet feel profoundly lonely if those connections feel superficial or unsatisfying. Research shows that both isolation and loneliness independently increase health risks, but loneliness, the subjective feeling, appears to have stronger effects. This tells us something important. It's not just about the quantity of social contact, but the quality. Meaningful connections where you feel understood, valued, and emotionally close to others are what protect health. Superficial interactions or relationships that feel obligatory or unfulfilling don't provide the same protective benefits. For older adults, several factors conspire to increase loneliness risk. Retirement removes the daily social contact and sense of purpose that work provides. Children move away for careers or family reasons. Friends and siblings die or move to assisted living. Mobility limitations from arthritis, vision problems, or other health issues make it physically harder to get out and socialize. Hearing loss makes conversations difficult and exhausting, leading many to withdraw from social situations. The death of a spouse removes the primary relationship and social companion for many seniors. Our modern society has also created structural conditions that promote elder loneliness. We've moved away from multi-generational households where elders lived with or near family. We've created age-segregated communities where older adults are separated from younger generations. We've built car-dependent suburbs where you need to drive to see anyone, which becomes impossible when you can no longer drive safely. We've allowed community institutions like churches, clubs, and civic organizations to decline, removing gathering places where relationships formed naturally. So what can be done? The research is clear that interventions can work, but they need to be thoughtful and sustained. Simply putting lonely people in the same room doesn't necessarily help, and can sometimes make loneliness worse if the interactions are forced or superficial. The most effective interventions seem to be those that facilitate meaningful connections around shared interests or purposes. Programs that bring together people around activities they genuinely enjoy, whether that's gardening, art, music, games, learning, or volunteering, create natural contexts for relationships to develop. These shared interest connections feel less forced and more authentic than interactions that exist only because someone is trying to combat loneliness. The activity provides something to talk about and bond over, making conversations easier, especially for people who've become rusty at social interaction. Technology offers some promising possibilities, especially for homebound seniors. Video calling provides richer connection than phone calls alone, allowing people to see facial expressions and feel more present with distant family members. Online communities around hobbies or interests can provide meaningful interaction, though they shouldn't completely replace in-person contact when possible. Some seniors have found companionship through online gaming, book clubs, or educational classes. Intergenerational programs show particular promise, bringing together elders with children or young adults in mutually beneficial ways. Seniors might read to school children, share skills or life experience, or provide mentoring. These programs combat loneliness while also giving older adults a sense of purpose and contribution, which has its own health benefits. Similarly, volunteer programs that engage seniors in meaningful community work provide both social connection and the psychological benefits of feeling useful and valued. Pet ownership has been shown in multiple studies to reduce loneliness and improve health outcomes for seniors. The companionship of a pet provides unconditional affection and a sense of being needed. Pets also facilitate social connection with other people, as walking a dog creates opportunities for conversations with neighbors and other dog owners. Of course, pets require consideration of the senior's ability to provide care, but for those who can manage it, the benefits are substantial. At a societal level, we need to recognize loneliness as the serious health threat it is and dedicate resources accordingly. This means training healthcare providers to screen for loneliness and social isolation just as they screen for depression or substance abuse. It means funding community programs that bring people together. It means designing neighborhoods and housing that facilitate rather than inhibit social connection. It means creating transportation options for seniors who can no longer drive. The science is unequivocal. Loneliness kills through multiple biological mechanisms that damage virtually every system in your body. But unlike many health threats, this one has a solution that's actually pleasant. Meaningful human connection doesn't just prevent early death. It makes life worth living at any age. Thanks for joining us on Elderly Discoveries, where we shine a light on the issues that truly matter for healthy aging.